Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, November 25th. We have a huge show for you. Craziness, lots of chaos over the weekend, especially in college football. That is what our main focus of our show is today. Of course, as we do every Monday, we have our top 25 playoff ranking for you, 1 through 25, with a group of 5 top 5 in there as well. And of course, we'll go over our 5 winners, 5 losers. Lots of college football, but also plenty of NFL. Saquon Barkley with a career and record-setting night for himself, as well as for the Eagles franchise, and a preview of the Harbaugh Bowl, the Jim versus John Harbaugh game, just the 3rd time ever. We'll talk about that matchup and much more, but before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, November 25th. But like I was saying, we are going to start off our show with the top 25 for you, kicking it off right away with our group of 5 top 5. Starting off at number 5, a brand new entrant on our list. We obviously had a lot of movement in this G5, T5, these top 5 group of 5 teams over the last couple of weeks, having 2-3 teams lose in back-to-back weeks from this list. So we have a brand new entrant at number 5, that being Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern has quietly had one of the better years in the Sun Belt. Now, it's not as strong of a conference as it was last year. There's a lot of teams that took a step backwards, but when you take a look at the group of 5, outside of the top 3, it's not very clear as to how far down it goes. I really thought about putting Jacksonville State in there. I ended up leaning towards Georgia Southern. I just think overall they have a little more upside than Jacksonville State in there, but that's a team I was thinking of putting in. Army at 4. They slip a couple spots after an absolute blowout loss against a good Notre Dame team in Yankee Stadium. That was going to be their make it or break it game for the season. We all know that. They can still win a conference championship when they take on Tulane for the American title. We don't know how that's going to go, but this should be a very fun game at the end of it. Army, still a very good team. UNLV secures, most likely, I will say, secures a berth in the Mountain West Conference Championship game. They are at number 3 here today. UNLV has been one of those teams that's just been hanging around for a while. They took a tough loss against a Syracuse team that I think is really good, a tough loss against Boise State, but they've hung around. They've played good football. They deserve to be up here, and I think they're pretty clearly in the top 3. Number 2 and number 1, Tulane and Boise State, still the same. I can understand if you want to have the orders reversed. I have had a lot of trouble justifying it to myself, keeping Boise State at number 1 with the way that they've played, only winning by 7 points against a Wyoming team that has been one of the worst in college football this year, at least in the FBS. It's not a good look for them. They need to get it figured out, get back into early season form, but right now they're still the number 1 team in the group of 5 because I think they just have the slightly better resume than Tulane. It's not that close. It's not that far off, though. Tulane has a real shot. But getting into the real top 25 here, at number 25, we have, of course, the Florida Gators. Now, I will caveat this with, again, I don't know if there's truly 25 teams that deserve to be ranked. I think for my liking, I think there's only 23 teams that should be ranked. So for the last 2 spots, I decided to show some love to some teams that have been red hot as of late, and very few teams fit that description better than the Florida Gators. They have now taken out 2 straight ranked opponents. They have been amazing since DJ Lagway really turned it on, stepped in as the starter. That team has a really bright future. They're a team that I think deserves a lot of love, and maybe this, and I will fully admit this is probably too high to rank them, especially with the beginning of the season that they had. But when you take a look at just the last month of work, this is a Florida Gators team that has been as hot as just about anybody in the country right now, and they deserve some love, especially after their second straight upset in a row. At 24, we have... All right, it's not working. We're just going to go over here then. At 24, we have the Kansas Jayhawks. We talk about another team that is having, its fair share of issues at the beginning of the season. But again, you want to talk about a red-hot team, that is the Kansas Jayhawks. They have now won 3 straight ranked games. 3 straight ranked games for the Kansas Jayhawks, and they are playing spoiler like nobody else in the Big 12 right now. They've all but eliminated BYU. They've all but eliminated Kansas State. They have all but eliminated now Colorado. They are a wrecking ball through that Big 12 conference, and they are not letting anybody stop them from getting to a bowl game. This is a Kansas team that is on a mission, and this is the Kansas team that we expected to see at the beginning of the season. They just took a little while to get ready, and you see why they were so dangerous to start the year. At 23, we have UNLV. Like I said, I think this is the first team that really deserves to be ranked. UNLV's season has been really underrated thus far. They've been holding on around my 20 to 25 range basically all season. They were off last week. They're in as a not ranked team after a couple of other teams fell out. But UNLV, a team that just likes to stick around. They win a lot of games. They have a very potent offense, and their defense has been playing incredible as of late. You got to show some love over there. UNLV, the number 23 team in the nation. At number 22, we have the Syracuse Orange. And this is a team that I think is just criminally underrated, if I'm being completely honest with you. We take a look at where they stand, where Syracuse has been from their past couple of seasons to where they are now. Kyle McCord is playing excellent football. They do have 3 losses, which I understand, and they're going into a game against Miami this week that they probably don't have a great shot of winning. Miami, a very good team, but this is a Syracuse team that if you let them stay in the game, they're going to play gritty football. They're gonna make you regret that you let them stay in the game, because that defense is opportunistic and that offense has the ability to just go up and down the field on you regardless of how good that defense is. And they've showed it in a couple of weeks back to back, couple of tough games. They've bounced back from it. Syracuse is my number 22 team. At 21, we have BYU. Oh, how the mighty have fallen, right? BYU, a top 10 team. I believe I had them in the top 5 a couple of weeks ago, actually. Maybe a premature overranking for me, but they've now lost 2 straight games. Granted, they've lost 2 straight games to 2 pretty good teams, right? They lose to Kansas, and this week they lose to Arizona State. Both of those teams, I think, are really good. As you'll see, they're both in my top 25, so I didn't want to punish them too much for that, but this is a tough look for BYU. It looks like they were in the driver's seat to make the Big 12 title game, to make a playoff spot. Instead, now they're in danger of missing out completely, not even making the Big 12 title game. It is a mess right now for them, and they are in a free fall. They need to get it fixed quickly. There was a lot to like in that second half, especially that fourth quarter. They made it a game. They were down by almost 20 points in that fourth quarter. They came all the way back, made it a 5-point game. I know there was some clock mismanagement by Arizona State, but still a big win for Arizona State, and it's a bad loss for BYU, but the fact that they fought back into it at the end shows me a lot about this team, and they're not dead yet. They're still alive. They're still kicking. They still have a shot in the Big 12. So for now, they're in the top 25 at 21. At number 20, we have Texas A&M, a team that, again, I have my problems with. I've talked about it. They don't really know what they're going to do at quarterback. They've now lost a couple of games with Green at quarterback. I think Wegman needs to go back there. They seem like a much better team, and they've had their highest highs with Wegman back there at quarterback is all I'm saying. I don't think they're going to make that change back. Not my decision. I just think that's the way it should go. Texas A&M, a really good defense. They're a team that really challenged for that SEC title game, and they still have a shot. They're still here because they still have a shot. But if they don't beat Texas next week, they are eliminated. And it's crazy to say that for a team that already has 3 losses. they still have a chance to make the playoffs with an auto bid just because of tiebreakers and the way it goes. I don't think this is a great Texas A&M team. I think they've mismanaged, especially that quarterback situation, and I think they could have won a lot more games. This 4 overtime loss against Auburn this week is really disappointing for them, and really the whole SEC had a really disappointing week. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But Texas A&M falls down 4 spots because they were already a little bit lower on my ranking than a lot of other people. 4 spots to number 20. At 19, we have Iowa State, a team in the Big 12 that's hanging on for dear life. They can still find a way into that Big 12 title game. A loss from Colorado last week really, really helps them. This is a great Iowa State team. They play Kansas State this week. That is going to be a huge matchup. That's going to be huge for deciding who gets in. Iowa State, I believe, is still in the driver's seat. I don't have all the tiebreaker rules up in front of me, but Iowa State, a team that has bounced back very nicely from losing 2 straight. They get a big win this week. I think they've got a shot. I think they're pretty comfortably in that race for the Big 12. I'm not sure if they're the best team in the Big 12, but this is a team that's definitely going to be competitive regardless of what you throw out there. One team ahead of them, though, also in the Big 12, they suffered a big loss. At number 18, we have Colorado. They were on a roll. They controlled their own destiny. They just ran into red-hot Kansas, a team that I don't think anybody was expecting to come on the way they have in the second half, and Colorado just did not have an answer. There's been lots of diagnoses for why this is going on with Colorado. For my money, and from what a lot of people have said, is that they're very one-dimensional, right? Their offense is explosive through the air. They don't have a run game, though. And Kansas's corners are really good. We saw that in the BYU game. We saw that last week. They just did not have the offensive firepower to come out and deal with that Kansas defense, and Kansas made them pay for it. Colorado is the number 18 team in the nation. Ole Miss, after another loss, is down 6 spots to number 17. I don't know what happened there. They were playing like arguably the best team in the country, coming off of a bye week nonetheless. Then they lay an egg this week against Florida. I understand Florida's been playing great ball recently, and there's a reason that I threw them at number 25 here, but this is an Ole Miss team that was expected to do so much more. This was an Ole Miss team that had all of these playoff aspirations. You had people talking about, oh, they should be in regardless, and they were. Now they're on the outside, and I would say that they're probably eliminated at this point. Ole Miss has eliminated themselves. They basically controlled their destiny to the playoffs. They didn't even have to. They were going to make an auto bid spot as long as they didn't lose. Instead, they drop a very winnable game to Florida and find themselves as probably one of the second or third or fourth teams out of the 12 teams playoffs. They're just not quite going to make it, seemingly like it is every single year with this Ole Miss team. At number 16, we have Clemson. They did what a lot of other teams this week just did not do, and that's win. They played the Citadel. They were expected to win. They've looked better. They've started to play some better competition. They beat Pitt last week on a last-second run. Cade Klubnik, I think, is really coming into his own. I'm still not convinced when they go up against some real competition. We'll find out this week when they play South Carolina in rivalry week. But I need to see a little bit more before I start to move them up. I know the AP poll had them all the way up in the top 12. That's not as far as I would move them. Clemson, I'm still not totally bought back into. They're at number 16. At 15, we have Alabama, and I don't know what happened here. Jalen Milroe seemed like he had turned a corner, was playing some of the best ball of his career. Then they run into an Oklahoma team that had not won a game in the FBS since September. They were struggling. That defense could not stop anybody. That offense especially could not get anything going, and they could not move the ball. I know there was a bad call. Maybe one of the worst calls that we've seen in recent memory against Alabama that took a touchdown off the board. But if you're going to sit there and say to my face, with a straight face, that Alabama lost because of a call that would have put them only down by 2 touchdowns instead of 3, you're crazy, you're delusional, and you're coping. They would not have won that game either way. That one play would not have changed the outcome. And sure, maybe it was kind of a BS call. Sure. Give them that give them a 10 on the scoreboard instead of a 3. They still lose by double digits. They still lose by 2 scores. That is not how you want to go out as Alabama. And this is an Alabama team that basically is eliminated now. Maybe if more chaos happens the way that this season has been, they can find a way to sneak back into the playoffs. But now that's 2 losses against some really bad opponents, or some, I won't say bad opponents, some opponents you're not supposed to lose to in Vandy and Oklahoma. This is not a good look for them, and they need to find a way to figure it out, and they need to find it now. Alabama at number 15. We have another group of 5 school all the way up to number 14. It's Tulane. Tulane on a bye week. Chaos and bye weeks, sometimes they just happen to be at the same time, and Tulane has showed me a lot over these last couple of weeks. Obviously not this week, but the way that they have been dominating. The last time we saw them, they shut out a Navy team that was undefeated, one of the last undefeated teams in the nation. Obviously, they've started to slip a little bit, but 45-0. The offense under Darian Mensah is awesome. I think he's one of the most underrated quarterbacks in all of college football, and this is a very good Tulane team that deserves a little bit more respect. Tulane is at number 14. At 13, we have South Carolina. South Carolina, again, you want to talk about one of the hottest teams in the nation? That is South Carolina. Unfortunately, they are my first team out. I know it hasn't worked that way in the last couple of weeks, but when we take a look at the playoff bracket, it's 1 through 12 in my rankings, at least. You have all the 5 conference champions in the top 12 for now. That can still change, and we're going to find out tomorrow based on what the committee says how that's going to look. But at least for my rankings, 1 through 12 are going to be the playoff seeds, and we'll talk about those in a second. But South Carolina, they deserve a lot of respect. They have a huge game this week. I love this South Carolina team. Beamer ball is going insane, and I think they have a real shot to make the playoffs, especially if they beat Clemson. That might push them all the way in. At number 12, and the number 12 seed in the college football playoffs for me, it's Boise State. I know I talk a lot about how good Tulane is, and you can see in my rankings that Tulane's only 2 spots behind Boise State, but they're still behind them. It's that close of a gap. It's a super thin margin, but I do legitimately think that those 2 teams are both top 15 in the country, and I think there's a real shot that they both get in as automatic bids, conference champions. And I would be actually very excited if that happened. I'm not sure if that's actually how it's going to go, but Boise State has started to concern me a little bit. They've slowed down, especially offensively. Ashton Genty's still putting up great stats, but still, we need to see more out of this team, especially on offense. They've really started to slow down. They need to pick it back up to their pace that they were at the beginning of the season if they want to not lose their auto bid spot to Tulane. And maybe even the way they're playing right now, UNLV beats Boise State in the Mountain West Championship game. That is a real possibility. UNLV, I think, might even be playing better ball than Boise State right now, but we'll see. I'm not ready to say that yet. They're all really close. They're all obviously in my top 25. At number 11, and the number 4 seed in the college football playoffs, it's Arizona State. How about the Sun Devils? The Sun Devils come up huge. They have been on an incredible hot streak. They come up huge against a against a Colorado team. They come up huge against a BYU team that really put them to the test there. That was a huge win for them. This is a great Arizona State team, and I think they're the best in all of the Big 12. I think they're good enough to legitimately be a top 10 team in the country. I put them outside at 11, but this is a team that's really turned the corner, and you can really see the way that program is starting to revive itself. This is a really good Arizona State team. They're number 11, number 4 in the college football playoffs. At number 10, we have the Tennessee Volunteers. They also are at the number 10 spot in the college football. They're at the number 11 spot in the college football playoffs. Tennessee, we take a look at them. They won a game in the game that you would expect them to win, but they did it. That's something that not a lot of those contenders in the SEC can say. And I think honestly, they might, as long as they win out, as long as they beat Vanderbilt, they might have secured themselves a lock in the college football playoffs. I think this week was a lock for a lot of teams. Tennessee might have been amongst them as long as they can win out. That's obviously the caveat with a lot of these. Tennessee, I think, is one of those teams that locked themselves in there. At number 9, we have SMU. SMU in my rankings would be the number 10 seed in the college football playoffs, which means they don't get that bye, which means the ACC is now a 2-bid league. That is a huge development for the college football playoffs. We talked a lot about how the ACC and the Big 12 seemed like they were only going to get 1 bid each. But now, at least for me, the way that the Mustangs have been playing, it's incredible. They lose their first game to a really good BYU team. Obviously, BYU has playoff aspirations. After that, they haven't lost since. They've taken down a lot of great opponents, and I think they're the best. There's an argument for you to make that they're the best team in the ACC. I don't think they're quite there yet. I love this Miami squad, but SMU definitely has the momentum, and they have the juice offensively and a little bit more defensively than Miami has all season, and that's going to make them a very dangerous team. SMU at number 9, number 10 in the playoffs. At number 8, we have the Indiana Hoosiers. This was the big question of the week, right? Where are the Hoosiers going to land if and when they lose? They end up losing, and if I'm being completely honest with you, they looked awful. They got bullied up front. Their offensive line stood no chance against Ohio State. Curtis Rourke had no time to throw the ball, and they were just incredibly ineffective. They hung tight in the first half. Then they got blown out. They end up losing by 23 points. This is an Indiana team that I want to believe in. And through no fault of their own, through nothing that they've done, I believe this is one of those teams, kind of like Tennessee, that has clinched a spot in the college football playoff. As long as they win out, as long as they get to 11-1, I don't see a way that Indiana misses the playoffs. They are currently, at least for now, the number 9 seed in the college football playoffs, number 8 overall in my rankings. Indiana, I love this team. I think they've locked themselves into a college football playoff spot with a win. At number 7, we have Penn State, a team that I've been low on. They survive a scare in Minnesota. Maybe should not have won that game. Again, I've been low on I've been low on Penn State all season, and we knew that was going to be a potential upset game right there. They're able to escape, and that's a skill in and of itself. I say that for a lot of teams. I say that for Penn State. Winning is a skill, and we've seen that around college football. In these tight games, you can easily drop them. It shows a lot that the team like Penn State, who probably in past years would have ended up dropping that game, is able to come through and win that game when they needed to step up. Penn State is up 2 spots to number 7, and they're number 8 overall in my playoff rankings. At number 6, we have the Miami Hurricanes. They get the auto bid out of the ACC, the number 3 seed in the college football playoffs. They get a massive win over Wake Forest. It doesn't say too much about them. Wake Forest, not a really great team. But what we did see is that defense hold them to 14, which is kind of something we hadn't seen a lot out of this Miami team. Again, I know it's Wake Forest, but it's exciting to see them hold a team under 20, especially with the season winding down the way that it is. Miami is most likely set up for a date with SMU in the ACC championship game. That should be a lot of fun. I really do want to see that matchup, but they have not clinched yet. They still need to take care of business against maybe one of the more underrated teams in all of college football in Syracuse this week. At number 5, we have Georgia, the Bulldogs. Again, didn't really do much this week. They didn't need to do much this week. They were taking care of business against UMass. That cupcake schedule, the cupcake game that all of the SEC plays, I think it's dumb. I hate that they do that, but they do. It's part of it. It was just, I guess, a tune-up. Carson Beck looked pretty good. He's had his struggles over the last couple of weeks. He's had his struggles over the last month of the season. He looked good, as he should have, against a bad UMass squad, but we didn't learn anything about Georgia. They stay put at number 5. They are the number 7 seed in my college football playoff. Continuing in the top 5, at number 4, Notre Dame. And you can yell at me all you want about Notre Dame. I understand the situation that Notre Dame is in. Oh, but they lost to NIU. Yes, they did lose to NIU. I'm well aware of that blemish on their record, and you can use that argument against me all you want. But you take a look at this team at week 3 in that NIU game, and you take a look at this team in week 14 now, and you cannot tell me that this team now would have lost to NIU. Now, obviously, it was a shocker when NIU beat them, but this is a Notre Dame squad that had a call with the NIU coach, and clearly something the NIU coach saw in that defense or in his game plan and shared with the Notre Dame coach changed what they were as a football team. And I truly do believe this is a different football team than that 1 week, than that game against NIU. And I understand it's a blemish that's hard to ignore. But as long as they win out, especially with a huge win against an undefeated team in Army, a good Army squad, they've taken care of both service academies now while they were undefeated. I think that Notre Dame pretty clearly is a top 5 team in the nation. And I think they've locked themselves into the playoffs. Now, of course, they still need to win out. They still need to take care of business. But they're another team that I think has locked themselves in. At number 3, it's not going to be much different. Texas. Again, I've heard lots of complaints about, strength of schedule, blah, blah, blah. Texas is one of the best teams in all of college football. You can't convince me otherwise. I know they took a bad loss to Georgia, but Georgia didn't look too good in that game either. And you can yell at me in SEC all you want, but Georgia is in my top 5. Texas is in my top 3. I still think both of those teams are a virtual lock to make the playoffs, so I wouldn't make too much of a fuss about it. Texas is in as the number 2 seed in my college football playoffs and the number 3 team in the nation. At number 2, we have Ohio State, a huge win for them. They take care of business against an Indiana team that clearly just was not up to par against this Ohio State squad. Still a magical season for Indiana, but Ohio State showed their dominance. They showed why they're the number 2 team in the nation. They showed why they came in as title favorites to the beginning of the season, or at least very short odds to win the title. They're number 2, number 5 overall in the college football playoff bracket, which leads us to number 1. And that is the Oregon Ducks. The Oregon Ducks are the number 1 team in the nation. They were on a bye, so we didn't learn anything about them, but it's a much-needed bye. They survived last week in Wisconsin. I still think this is the best team in the nation. And you can argue with me that maybe Ohio State should have gone above them, but I'm respecting that head-to-head, and I don't think anybody's going to have too many issues with that. Oregon at number 1, the number 1 overall seed in the college football playoffs, and I'll run through the college football playoffs real quick. 1, the Oregon Ducks. 2, the Texas Longhorns. 3, we have the Miami Hurricanes. 4 is the Arizona State Sun Devils. 5 is Ohio State, the Buckeyes. 6 is Notre Dame. 7, we have the Georgia Bulldogs. 8 is Penn State. 9 is Indiana. 10 is SMU. 11 is Tennessee. And number 12, Boise State. First team out, South Carolina. Second team out, Tulane. Let me know what you thought of that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of college football. It was another wild week, but we have more college football to talk. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we turn our attention to the winners of college football this week before turning our attention to the losers after that. So we'll be right back. We'll be right back for that and more here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't replaced all this my sound. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, November 25th. If you are just tuning in, we just went over our college football top 25. Go back and check that out if you are curious about what we had. In this segment, we turn our attention to college football winners and losers. Starting off with the winners, we have the top 5 winners of the week. We'll break down who won the most, why they won, and more. But before we get into that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, November 25th. But like I was saying, we are getting into the winners and losers from college football, as we do every single Monday. Start off with the winners. We have picked the top 5 winners of the week. Starting off at number 5, we talked a little bit about it when we did our college football top 25, but at number 5, it's Notre Dame. You talk about a team that needed that win badly. That was the one that was going to decide the fate of not just them, but also the Army Black Knights. They come in to Yankee Stadium, a huge environment for them against their second undefeated service academy that they've faced this season, and they take care of business yet again. Whatever was said between the NIU coach and the Notre Dame coach has made waves in that for that team. They have fixed it up, and this is a Notre Dame team that I think has all but secured themselves a spot in the college football playoffs. They absolutely control their own destiny, and that was a huge win for them to get. Probably the last big threat for them this season, but you still need to finish strong. Get one more win, and you are in. Notre Dame, the number 5 winner of the week. At number 4, we have the ACC as a whole. Look, I've talked a lot about conference supremacy this season. It's been one of the things that I've harped on ever since this 12-team college football thing got brought up, ever since they started proposals with the SEC and the Big Ten saying, hey, we need 4 guaranteed spots. We need 5 guaranteed spots. The ACC, you only get 1 spot. The big whatever. They've been saying all this, breaking it down by conference, and I've been holding this hill. This is a hill that I've been willing to die on. Conference supremacy changes year by year, and we see that this year. The ACC got a huge win this week with how the SEC continues to implode around itself. These teams are cannibalizing each other. Usually you have these contenders in the SEC pull ahead from the rest. Not so this year. Auburn takes down Texas A&M. You had 2 other massive upsets. This is a huge win for the ACC because now instead of looking like they're a 1-bid league, they look like they're going to be a 2-bid league with maybe even getting an extra at-large bid from an SEC team that is no longer in playoff contention after this week of football. The ACC is a huge winner from this week. They're the number 4 winners. At number 3, and I know this is going to sound weird, the number 3 winner this week is Indiana. I know Indiana got a loss, and I know they looked awful in that loss. They no longer have that undefeated season, but with everything else that happened this season, with everything else that happened this week, Indiana is a lock to make the college football playoffs. I am locking them into the college football playoffs as long as they win, and because of that, they are the 3rd winner of this week, regardless of what happened on that football field in the shoe against Ohio State. I know they didn't look great. I'm well aware of that. But still, a huge week for them because they're going to make that 12-team college football playoff as long as they finish strong. Our number 2 winner this week, Arizona State. How about that? A muddled Big 12. Who knew? Arizona State, who was picked by the experts at the beginning of the season to finish dead last, 16th in the Big 12, now has the bull by the horns. They control their destiny to the college football playoffs, and for my money, they are the best team in all of the Big 12. Both Colorado and BYU lose this week. Obviously, Arizona State taking care of BYU in that one, but this is a massive victory for a program that was suffering. Kenny Dillingham has turned that program around in 2 years, and you can see that is going to be a juggernaut in the Big 12 as long as they can continue that recruitment effort that they have going right now. This is a fun team. This is an Arizona State team that's come on strong, and again, now they control their own destiny to the playoffs, which is why they are the number 2 winner of the week. But at number 1, the number 1 winner of the week this week, it's Ohio State. They played the biggest game of the week. They had the most media attention. And you know what they did? They went out and they proved that they are one of the best teams in the country. They made Indiana look like they did not deserve to be on the same field as them. They went out there and they dominated them on the offensive line, on the defensive line especially. Oh my goodness. They did not let Curtis Rourke drop back. 2 steps, they were in his face. He did not get a clean pocket all day long, and credit to Indiana. They hung around as much as they could, but Ohio State physically dominant, especially on that defensive line. They just swallowed up the offensive line, did not let the run game get going, and they did what they needed to do. That was a huge win for them. It was a statement win for them, and they really showed that they are arguably the best team in the nation. I know they have that loss to Oregon, but Oregon has not had a super convincing game. Even in that win against Ohio State, arguably should have lost, honestly. I think Oregon still is a better team, but that is a real tight debate. 1A, 1B type situation, and they showed me a lot this week. Ohio State is the number 1 winner of the week. But to get to the losers, not going to spoil all the fun. We're going to take a quick break real quick. Then we get to the losers. Make sure you stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the winners, the top 5 winners from college football this week. Yet more chaos, of course, and maybe the most chaotic season in the history of college football. We finish off that half of the segment. We have our losers coming up here in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those 2 things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, throw it in the comments, throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, November 25th. But like I was saying, finishing up our segment here, we have the top 5 losers from week 13 of college football. We went over the winners. We had Ohio State, Arizona State, Indiana, the ACC, and Notre Dame over there on that side. On the losers, we've got Boise State. Again, kind of a little bit of what are they doing on that side of the aisle. Boise State gets another win. They continue their run. They've only lost 1 game all season, that to the number 1 team in the nation in Oregon, but they've really started to slow down. They had a commanding lead on that group of 5 spot. They looked like the best team in all of the group of 5 pretty handily. Now there's an argument that they could be all the way down to 3. Tulane has been playing incredible football. UNLV even might look a little bit better than them. Boise State needs to turn the gas on right now. They need to show that we are the better team. And for now, I think they are. It's hard to move them behind some of these other group of 5 teams, but it is incredibly close right now, and they're not doing themselves any favors by playing teams like San Jose State super close before pulling away, playing teams like Nevada super close, and then this week only winning by 7 in Wyoming. That's 3 straight games where they just have not looked their best. They need to turn that around quickly, or they will continue to be on this losing side of the of college football. At number 4, we have Army. That's a tough day for Army. They go into Yankee Stadium, a huge game for them. A game that if they won, if I'm being honest, probably would have shot them up into a prospective college football playoff spot. That was a huge game. They get blown out. Notre Dame shows them why, Notre Dame was expected to win that game, right? That was a massive game for them on the schedule, and now you see them fall pretty far. They're out of my top 25. They're in the honorable mentions there, but it seems like that season is over. They can still win the American championship against Tulane, but as far as getting the auto bid, it's probably up for them. It doesn't seem like they're making that college football playoffs. Still a great season for them, but this week did them in. They're all but eliminated right now. At number 3, and this is you got to follow me on this one. Number 3 is the conference championship games. And I know that sounds a little bit crazy for me to say because we're just talking about auto bids. The group of 5 gets an auto bid. The championship game is going to allow 5 conference teams to get in. But you also hear the way that some of these SEC schools, these bubble SEC schools, were talking about the conference championship game earlier this week. Lane Kiffin came out and said, "Hey, I don't really want to play in the conference championship game," and you can't really blame him for it, right? If you're a team like Texas A&M, who still has a shot at making the playoffs through that auto bid, right? If you are going to make that SEC championship game, generally you should expect to be in over, say, a team, the third place team in the SEC. Instead, you lose and you're out, right? That's an extra game that you get to play. And then if you lose, you get punished for it. And I think we're going to start to see that come to fruition. It's something that just is going to happen, and I think they need to find a way around it. I don't mind the way it is right now because this year it doesn't look like there's going to be any huge issues with it. But there is a situation, and I'm looking at the ACC in specific, right? At least for me right now. And when you look at the committee last week, the way that they had it, I'm going to assume that the committee is going to do the same thing. Both Miami and SMU are in. Let's just say, for sake of argument, that they both continue their winning ways, that they both continue to win football games. They both go to the ACC championship game with 1 loss. The loser of that game, and be honest with me, do you really think the loser of that game is going to get the at-large bid? I hope they do. I hope they do because I personally think that they deserve it. I think they deserve it over some 3-loss SEC team. I think they deserve it over some 3-loss Big Ten team. I really think they do. But I'm not convinced that they will. And it's going to suck for the college football championship games, for the future of college football, how meaningless these championship games will happen. We kind of saw one this week already with Oregon State taking out Washington State to pseudo-win the Pac-12 this year, although there won't be a trophy and there won't really be a championship game. But they played each other. Oregon State won, so you can probably call Oregon State the champion. It's not going to matter. It's a worrying concern for me. And that's why it's the number 3 loser of the week. Conference championship games aren't going away, but they need to find a better way to integrate them into this system. The number 2 loser, it's Colorado. They controlled their destiny to the playoffs. They were a team that was on the rise. They had everything going for them. Dion had coach of the year conversations surrounding him, and now they lose that game to Kansas, and everything's quieted down. Everything's gone away. The hype train has pulled out of the station, and it's not coming back. They still have an outside shot to get in if a couple things go right, but they controlled their destiny to the playoffs. They just needed to win out, and they just happened to run into a bullet of a team, a super red-hot team in Kansas, and they could not get over the hump. Deion Sanders has turned this program around. They've had an incredible year, but that has all but eliminated them from playoff contention. We will see what happens, though, as the next couple weeks go on. Again, chaos has reigned supreme this year in college football, which leads us to number 1. I'm sure you can guess this. The number 1 loser of the week this week, it's the SEC. We were having these arguments for the last 3 weeks with these college football playoff rankings coming out. Why are there only 4 SEC schools in? There should be 5. Notre Dame, there's no way Notre Dame should be in there. Why is the number 12 team in the nation not in the playoffs? Oh, these auto bids suck. We see why now, right? This is an SEC team. This is an SEC conference that is cannibalizing itself. And that was really the big story of the week. We thought it was going to be whatever the result of that Indiana-Ohio State game was. Instead, the SEC comes out and they just fall apart. Auburn takes out Texas A&M, a squad that still has an outside shot of making the college football playoff. You have Alabama getting absolutely destroyed by an Oklahoma team that has not won since November. Ole Miss, another team that was arguably playing like one of the best teams in the nation, a team that people thought should be ranked higher last week, loses to Florida, a team that, to be granted, also one of the hottest teams in the nation. But that is 3 SEC contenders right there that have just plummeted out of playoff contention. All 3 of them, or at least 2 of those 3, people wanted in the college football playoffs last week. Now we take a look, and at least for me, there's only 3 SEC schools that are comfortably in. And I think 4 would have been the right answer last week. I didn't mind that. But all the noise that was coming out of the SEC, oh, there's not enough in there. We're the best conference. Our wins mean more, right? Look at the strength of schedule. I understand it's all narrative pushing. It always is. But the SEC is the biggest loser this week. They just lost a playoff spot. No other conference can say that this week. No other conference can say for near certain that they lost a playoff spot this week, and that's what happened in the SEC. We'll see what happens the rest of the season, though. I'm excited for it. Those are our top 5 losers, our top 5 winners. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of this. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Monday Night Football is tonight. The Harbaugh Bowl takes place. The last time we saw this, it was a Super Bowl. We'll talk about that game, break down everything that can happen between the Ravens and the Chargers, and more. Coming up next, here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, November 25th. If you are just tuning in, we just went over the winners and losers from a chaotic Week 13 in college football, as well as our top 25. In this segment, we turn our attention to the big boys, the NFL. They have a massive Monday Night Football game tonight between 2 of the most revered coaches in all of football right now. The Harbaugh brothers, Jim and John Harbaugh. The last time we saw this matchup was a Super Bowl between the Ravens and the 49ers. They've only met 2 times in the past. We'll talk about all of that, break down this game, and more. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those 2 things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, November 25th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into some Monday Night Football preview here. This is going to be a great Monday Night Football game, not only with the storylines, but also you take a look at these 2 teams. Obviously, we do our power rankings every week, and I don't know how it's going to stand right now, but at least as it was last week, this is the number 5 versus the number 6 team in all of football for me. So you're already setting up for a top 5 matchup if we're looking at through the college football lens, as we have through a lot of the day so far, but also the storyline. Obviously, the biggest story is going to be between the Harbaugh brothers. The 3rd all-time matchup between them, John and Jim. John Harbaugh is 2-0 all-time, including a Super Bowl victory. That is a massive story here, but also these 2 teams. The Chargers coming off of a win that some people are saying changed the fortunes of their franchise. I think that's a little bit much to say. They still looked really bad in the second half. I know that the storyline for the Chargers throughout a lot of their time, at least in the last 10, 15, 20 years, has been, oh, they keep blowing these games in big moments. We can go back to the last playoff game that they played where they blew a huge lead to Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars. There's plenty of other examples of that, and it had shades of that in the last game. But the Bengals also have a history of that. So I'm not stepping away from that game and saying, you know what, the Chargers are cured. They're never going to blow games again, because that was very concerning to see. But the Ravens are coming off of a disappointing series of games in their own right. In the division, they have been poor, to say the least. They lose a game to the Browns. They lose in Jameis Winston's first game. Maybe you can say, oh, they weren't ready for the quarterback. Whatever. They lose to the Steelers. They did not, the defense, the thing that has been the issue for this team all season long, the thing that has held them back from winning multiple games, did an amazing job against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They did not allow the Steelers to get into the end zone a single time. And yet, they come away with a loss. They lose 18-16, a brutal loss for them. The offense disappears against division rivals. It seems they need to find a way to fix that, and they need to find a way to fix that quickly. Now, I know the Chargers are not a divisional rival, so maybe that's not going to be an issue, but they still need to show that they can recover from a game like this, right? This is going to be a very high-scoring game, I believe, which is something that you might not expect. But we did see the Chargers last game against a high-powered offense. They are susceptible to giving up big plays, especially through the passing game and on the ground. Chase Brown had the biggest impact on that game for the Bengals. I know you can point to the big plays made by Jamar Chase. You can point to the big plays made by T. Higgins, made by Joe Burrow, but the one that really got them going, the one that really got the yards and got the team to, where they needed to as far as the Bengals were, was Chase Brown. And you take a look at this Ravens team, they are best when Derrick Henry totes the ball 20 or more times. The Ravens has not lost a game in that situation. They have had some issues running the ball when they lose. Now, it doesn't always work, but this is a Chargers defense that has been shown that they can be run on. They are susceptible to giving up those big plays. So this, if the Ravens are going to win, is going to be a shootout. Now, I will say, regardless of what the Ravens offense does, Justin Herbert and that Chargers offense are going to have a field day out there. The Ravens defense may have stepped it up last week, but I do not believe in this team against a top 5 quarterback to change their fates. That secondary especially is incredibly weak. We've seen Kyle Hamilton deal with a couple injuries. He's supposed to be out there to play, but I still don't think that's really going to help this team. We've seen them not really be that great, especially against the pass. They've been torched by some really great receivers this season. Justin Herbert should have a field day with them. I expect this to be a super high-scoring game for the Chargers, at least. The question of the day is going to be the offense of the Ravens taking on the defense of the Chargers. Against the Chargers defense has been really good all season, but we saw them get blown up against in the second half last time out. I'm not convinced that doesn't happen again. And I think this is a very high-powered Baltimore offense. I think it's going to be enough for it to push them over the top. And I think the Ravens, who are favored by 3 in this one on the road against cross-country travel, is never easy. But I think that with Derrick Henry, he's going to have himself a huge game. We're not talking Saquon Barkley level huge with what he did last night, but I think he is going to have a huge game. And I think the Baltimore Ravens take this one in walk-off fashion almost, 34-30. Jim Harbaugh falls to 0-3 against his brother. This is going to be a really fun game, though. I'm super excited to see what happens. I'd love to hear your thoughts, though. What do you think of this game? Who's going to win? What's your final score prediction? We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we talk a little bit more about running backs. We talk a little bit more about Saquon Barkley, what he did last night, his history-making night. We'll talk about that and more coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, November 25th. If you are just tuning in, we just went over the Monday Night Football game. The Chargers taking on the Baltimore Ravens. John versus Jim Harbaugh should be a massive game this week tonight. In this segment, we finish off our show continuing in the NFL. We had a huge running back performance last night from Saquon Barkley of the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll talk about what he did, how historic it was, and what that means for the rest of the season going forward. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you were on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, November 25th. But like I was saying, in this segment, we are going to finish up our show talking a little bit about Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley, what more is there to say about him, right? 302 scrimmage yards, breaking a Philadelphia Eagles record. Not only that, but he set a career-high mark for rushing yards in a season already. Just 12 weeks into the year, and he already is breaking records that he had with the Giants. Now, I'm not here to be a salty Giants fan. I'm not here to say, oh, he should have never left, because he should have. Objectively, it was the right decision. He could have never done anything like he's doing right now with the New York Giants, and you see that with how the organization is currently crumbling. But that's not Saquon's fault. He didn't do anything wrong. He went and got that bag, and he deserved it. You see now what he did this week. He has thrown himself into legitimate MVP conversations. We have not seen a non-quarterback win an MVP since Adrian Peterson did it, a running back in 2012. And when you compare the numbers between Saquon Barkley and that Adrian Peterson kind of season, these basically on par. Yards per carry is higher. He's not getting the same amount of rushing yards, but he does have that extra game. Maybe he ends up cracking that 2,000 yard mark. Maybe he probably will, honestly. He's averaging 115 yards per game right now. That's just on the ground. From scrimmage, he's averaging even more than that. He is insane. He is the best player on the field on arguably the best team in the league. And the pickup by him from the Eagles has completely changed that team. We talk about a lot how the NFL is a passing league, how these leagues have changed. And when you take a look at it, you take a look at the top teams in the league. We'll just go in the NFC, right? Just start in the NFC. The top two teams in the NFC, I would say pretty undoubtedly the top two teams in the NFC are the Eagles and the Lions. And what are those two teams built around? I can tell you, they're built around the running game. With the Lions, it's a lot more obvious. You have your two-headed attack in David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. That is a deadly 1-2 punch right there, and they have absolutely rained chaos over the league as the linebackers continue to get smaller to deal with these tight ends and wide receivers running routes, as that seemed to be the case that was working back in the 2010s. Now you're seeing a shift back towards running. And the same thing with the Eagles. With Saquon Barkley, that team has found its identity. They struggled at the beginning of the season. They were not feeding him like he should have been fed, and now he is. You see what a difference it makes when they play clean football, when they start to play running back football, good old hand the ball off and watch your running back go to work kind of football. You also see it in the top of the AFC. It's not the exact same, but Josh Allen, what he does the best is a threat to run. It's a little bit unconventional, but he is a big man. And when he is doing when the Bills are at the best, he is playing like a running back more often than not. Now, obviously, he's still got the arm, and there's a little bit of exceptions in the AFC because you have all these superheroes at quarterback, right? You have Josh Allen, you have Patrick Mahomes, you have Lamar Jackson, you have these superheroes at the top of the AFC. But even in those three teams, you take a look at them and you say, what are they doing best right now? The Ravens, obviously, it's the running game. You have Derrick Henry. You have Lamar Jackson. It's the run game. The Chiefs, Maybe not obviously, but it is. It is the run game. When they have been at their best, which they haven't really been all season, it's when they're able to pound the rock with Kareem Hunt, with Isaiah Pacheco. They have been at their best when they're just running the ball down your throat and then playing play action off of it. The Bills, I already talked about them a little bit, but again, the emergence of James Cook and Ray Davis this season has been huge for them. Josh Allen continues to be that rushing threat. And obviously, the Chargers, they're up there too. I really do think the Chargers are up there. Justin Herbert could maybe even be classified as a superhero at quarterback. But again, they're a run-first team. Same thing with the Steelers, also up there. The Packers, also up there. Josh Jacobs, you start to see a trend. The Cardinals, a little more run-heavy than pass-heavy, but still up there. I'm just running through the top 10 teams on my power rankings from last week. That is the top 9. Every single one of them, you could argue is a run-first team. If you want to continue, number 10, the 49ers, probably not, but the 11, the Texans, absolutely, right? Commanders, yes. Vikings, But we're getting a little further down. That's 10 of the top 11 teams in my power ranking from last week that have running games as their focus or as their number one weapon. And that is not something we have seen in a very long time. It's exciting to see, and we start to see that shift. Again, this is something that I talk about with a lot of different sports. It's the waves of sports, right? At the top here, you have the passing game. Obviously, the offense is going to improve, right? They can't stop the pass. All these guys are too big, too slow to cover the receivers. Now the defenses start to adjust. They get smaller, they get faster, they get better at handling the receivers, and now they're down here. Now they're down here at where the running backs are bigger and faster and stronger than your second-level guys, and they're exploiting that. It's going to keep changing. It's going to go back and forth, and that's just kind of how all sports go. You see it. I think hockey's the best equivalent to see that in. And I know hockey's not a huge sport, but you take a look at the gap between goaltending and goal scoring. Back in the 80s and the 90s, they were scoring 5, 6, 7 goals a game. In the 2010s, they were scoring 3 goals a game. It's starting to take back up 4, 5 goals a game now because scores are catching up to goaltenders. It's going to go up and down, and it happens in every sport. It's just a cool little trend that we're noticing, and I think it's very obvious in football right now. A couple years ago, they said running backs aren't important. They let all of them walk. They didn't sign any of them to big contracts. People were like, oh, once running backs turn 30, they're done. We don't want them anymore. We see how wrong those teams were. The teams that went out and they pursued the running backs, the teams that invested in running backs, they're benefiting hugely right now. And I think that's what we're going to see more of in the NFL. I'm excited for it. I think there's a real shot he wins MVP. I don't think there's a clear contender right now that is way above him. But it's a lot of fun. Anyway, let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of this. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. We will be back tomorrow talking NFL, obviously Monday Night Football, do our NFL power rankings and winners and losers, as well as anything else that may have happened in the world of sports today and that I missed from over the weekend. Thank you for tuning in. You've been listening to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. You all have a great one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet.